So good morning to you, wherever you may be in the world today, in the UK and beyond. My name is Gerry Robinson, your host for the Connected Baby series, Tigers and Teddies Live. And here's the lady that makes it all happen, my partner in crime. Every Saturday morning when we do this, it's the wonderful Dr. Suzanne Zeedyk. Good morning, Suzanne. How are you today?
Gerry, if this is crime, then I'm trying to think of some lovely analogy. I think this is fabulous. This all came about by accident. This whole series, it was because people wanted it. And it is because so many people are willing to come and join us and talk about how they are putting into, bringing to life, putting into practice the science of connection. And I have loved sharing all these stories. It's fabulous to be back.
Just a message there from Lucy Diamond. Good luck to my dad, Gerry, says Lucy. So let's start with Gerry Diamond. Gerry, hello, good morning.
Hi there, nice to meet you all.
It's good to see you. Thank you for your time this morning, Gerry. You're the nurture lead at Clydebank High School.
Yep.
And we'll find out a little bit more about the job and your role and what a nurture lead does in just a moment. And also from Clydebank High School, I'm delighted to welcome Depute Headteacher Wendy Mcinally. Hello, Wendy. Good morning. Good morning. How are you today? This wonderful. Well, we're recording. This is going out live on a Saturday morning. People watch this later on in the week. But how are you this morning? You were saying that your Saturday mornings are usually sacrosanct.
Yeah, very precious, me the dog.
Well, we're delighted that you can join us this morning. Thank you very much indeed. And from Boclair Academy, Bearsden, just outside Glasgow, Douglas Brown. Douglas, good morning. You're the head teacher there.
Good morning. Lovely to see you.
Good to see you. And we've also got Clare Morgan, who's the depute head teacher. Clare, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning. It's lovely to be here.
Now let's do a quick round robin because one of the prerequisites of this series is showing your teddies. So let's have a look. So Clare, you've got two beautiful there. Who are they?
So this is Sully. This is my daughter's teddy bear. She was really keen for Sully to be here because Sully has met Suzanne before, virtually, of course, when she entered the competition previously. And of course, my wee boys, this is his dog. He is an absolute dog lover. So I've got both of these here today who are bringing me lots of comfort, I can assure you.
Wonderful, thank you. Douglas, how about you?
Well, this is Striper, and Striper is nearly 20 years old because my older daughter is nearly 20 years old and he's been on the road with us for quite a long time. So hello from a very old, and it used to be a hot water bottle holder, as you can see, but actually it's just something my daughter even now will not go to bed without. So
fantastic. Wendy, who's accompanying you this morning?
I became a grandmother for the first time 5 months ago, so this is my wee grandson's wee Teddy, so when he's not here I've got his wee Teddy.
Many congratulations. That's a wonderful story. And Gerry, who's with you this morning?
Sorry, I've not got anyone this morning, but you're going to have a wee treat. Sorry, during our video, when you'll see our nurture teddy called Cuddles, and he's going to be carrying a couple of problem bricks.
Okay, we're intrigued.
Gerry, my wee teddy can reach across the distance.
Thank you.
So can share the energy of mine.
Thank you.
So Suzanne, this morning we're talking about trauma-informed, and I think it's important to stress secondary schools because you have a view on this, and we'll explore that. But I want to start by opening with a question for you, and it's relating to a headline that was in The Guardian in October of this year. And the headline read this: "We're always there for them." That's a quote from the head teacher, I believe. And then, is the tide turning against zero tolerance in UK schools? Really interesting headline, and I'd like to get your view on that before we head in and speak to our professionals this morning.
Gerry, it's a really interesting place to start. First of all, there's no such thing as UK schools, meaning there's not a UK school system. So for anybody joining us from overseas, Scotland has a different school system than England. And one of the reasons I like to stress that is that it means you can have different cultures for a school system. And so one of the interesting tensions here in the UK is, does England tend to have more of a zero tolerance policy in more of their schools than in Scotland? And what zero tolerance means is that schools don't tolerate behavior, particular kinds of behaviors. So we have zero tolerance for behavior of a particular type. And that often means like challenging behavior, disruptive behavior. In other words, it's seen as bad, and children are often punished for that. Often in isolation rooms even, is one way of disciplining children in England. That doesn't tend to be used as much in Scotland. And one of the things we might explore this morning is, why is that? In Scotland, I think we have more, and increasingly so, of attention to children's feelings, to the way that relationships help with regulate feelings. And of course, emotions and feelings underpin behavior. So part of what is happening across Scotland is real attention to relationships and to feelings, and to the way that feelings are physiological states, and that relationships can help to calm children and help them with really big feelings. And then that has an automatic knock-on for behavior. And so one of the things I'm excited about this morning is that we can talk about that for secondary schools, because in my experience, the schools that are most likely to enter into this shift that's happening in this understanding is primary schools and early years. To have secondary schools on board is kind of still at the edge of this, is really exciting, and I think inspires other people. And so if we could help other secondary schools to hear the kinds of stories we're going to hear this morning, then I think it becomes a kind of a leadership. Other people can follow in the steps of where the schools that are with us this morning have gone.
Wonderful. Thank you, Suzanne. Gerry Diamond from Clydebank High School, you are Nurture Lead, is your job title, I believe. For those who aren't aware of what a Nurture Lead does, could you tell us a little bit more?
Yes, well, we've got kids who come into our room in the morning, and we called our nurture group in Clydebank High First Connection, because we feel it's really important for our children to have that first connection in the morning. And it really wasn't us as staff, Mrs. McGoldrick, who works along beside me in Nurture. It was a kid's choice. It was their decision to call it First Connection, because they felt that was really important for them at that time in the morning to have that first connection with members of staff. Because I was having a conversation the other day. I mean, some of our young people come into school with what I would call invisible backpacks of anxiety, stress, worry, sadness and grief. So it's really our job to help them through that in the morning and get them regulated and ready for the rest of the school day.
Wendy, you're the Depute Headteacher at Clydebank High School. How long has the concept of trauma awareness been around in your school? How did it start?
It started probably just over 3 years ago. We had got additional resources through the Attainment Challenge Fund, so there was definitely a big gap between those who are, living in more affluent areas. We're a very, very big, proper comprehensive school with 1,200 pupils, but we have about 60% of our cohort living in what is poverty, really, living in the very, very low deciles. So they are experiencing a lot of poverty. Therefore, the gap between those who have more and the gap between those who have less was quite big. So we got additional resources, but it wasn't necessarily money that we got. We got additional time for our educational psychology department. So what we did, we sat down and said, look, what's going to make a difference from our pupils? Going back to what you were saying earlier, Gary, we were that traditional school that was quite punitive and our ethos. And it was if you didn't conform, then you were put out the room. We had what was called an E-room, an isolation room. We could have had maybe 40 kids in a week in there through different periods, and I'll be very, very honest, but now we've been coming on such a journey with Nurture, and it has really transformed the culture of our school, to the point where we hardly see any kids in our isolation room. It's not even called that anymore, it's called a support base. We change even the language that we use in and around young people and with staff, to the point where we've had huge impact with exclusion figures, with referrals, with relationships with staff. So I mean, it's been a long journey for us. However, it wasn't just with young people, it was with staff as well. We knew that we had to work with both for it to work.
Well, let's investigate that in more detail in just a moment, Wendy and Gerry. But let's take a moment to see your school in action. We've got a very special video for us.
I am so excited that we have chosen, because we thought it was important to have this pupil's voice here as well. It's not just the adults, it's actually to hear what the young people think as well. So this video is from the young people of Clydebank.
I'm Finlay, I'm in S2 and I'm 13.
I'm Georgina and I'm in S3 and I'm 14.
The interventions I've been involved in is mindfulness and nurture.
And I've been involved in mindfulness and nurture as well.
First thing, you have your breakfast, toast, tea, whatever. Then we do either art or learn about regulation skills and things like that.
We get like our breakfast, and we usually just talk, and we do our merits and demerits, and we do our how our week's been going on and stuff.
Programs I'm doing are regulation skills and resilience.
We learn about the brain. So we've been learning about the bottom-up approach, about regulate and relate and reason, and it's about the brainstem and the limbic bulb and the prefrontal cortex, and it's about storing memories and habits and emotion responses. And then we go up to the thinking brain, and it's about calm and connected and full engaged in learning and stuff. And then we learn about regulate is calm and anxiety and stuff like that.
I also go to mindfulness and I learn breathing, so 4-7-11.
And I learn about how to not worry about if you're going to a class and not panicking.
I regulate them from the bottom up by breathing, that stops your heartbeat, and then fight, flight and freeze also helps.
So when I was in nurture in second year, I used to always worry, and I'd not be able to cope in classes, and I'd always worry and stuff. And then but nurture's helped me by calming down, and my anxiety is not as bad as it used to be when I was in 7-11 and stuff.
Also, before I came to nurture, I was always talking in class and getting really fidgety and worried about a lot of things, but I didn't actually realise that's the reason I was talking a lot. But then when I came to nurture, I realised why I was doing these things, and then I realised how I could help. And I was getting stressed and anxious a lot of the time. Now I have coping strategies to help with that. We also use the problem books in nurture and resilience.
And we usually do some games with them, and we do things if we don't share our problems and our emotions, then they'd all get bundled up and they'd be dead heavy to carry.
Wonderful. There's a number of points I'd like to come back on fairly shortly on the video. But before I go to Douglas and Claire from Boclair, Gerry, talk to me a little bit, could you please, about the problem brick that we saw there? How did that concept come about?
Yeah, well, just as I was talking about at the start of the programme there, we've got kids who come in with a lot in their backpacks. I would call it the invisible backpack. No one else can see it apart from the young person. So it's about them holding the brick. It's got a bit of weight in it. So we tend to talk about what's it like to carry your problems about with you. And these problems can become heavy if the young person does not share it with someone. And again, I always bring it down to relationships. If they feel comfortable, they feel somebody cares for them, somebody's got empathy for them, they will share your problems and they will get rid of the weight from that problem brick.
And so can I come in? I love the problem brick. I just love the problem brick because quite literally it becomes a metaphor, but a very literal metaphor, that children hold the problem brick at Clydebank High, which represents the burdens they carry, and their classmates and friends step in to literally hold the brick with them. So it is a literal demonstration that people will help you with the things that you struggle with. And many children don't know that because they didn't have those experiences early in their life. And so if you didn't get a chance to learn that in your families or in primary school or from your other relationships, secondary school is the only place that most young people will learn that. So I really just love that this problem bit demonstration is a literal metaphor for how people help you with emotional struggles. Have I got that right, Gerry?
Yeah, and we never leave the young person isolated in the room their own. We've got 2 bricks, so both kids would come out at the same time. We've got another wee group there, and we create a problem, or what problems do we have at the moment, and they will share their problems because they're sharing them in a safe environment, and that makes the world of a difference.
Douglas, you're head teacher at Boclair Academy. Could you tell me how trauma awareness is embedded in your school, into your practice?
Yeah, I mean, it was a real delight, first of all, to Clydebank to listen to your young people and to hear your story. It's not dissimilar for us. A slightly different demographic, maybe. Often people think of a school situated maybe in an area like we are, that it's plain sailing and it's all affluence. We've got around 20% of our young people live in poverty when they come to school every day, and there's a real mix in our school, and I'm very biased and hugely in love with my school, actually. So I think it's a terrific school, but it's definitely diverse, and that rich mix makes it who we are. But there was definitely a moment really, I suppose, where, and I said earlier on before we came onto the chat, about making a decision and thinking through what you want your school to be, and that relationship approach started years and years ago, and through that approach that we took, there's a real commitment in East Dunbartonshire wide to nurture and looking after, and it's actually an East Dunbartonshire wide approach to nurture our young people that we first became almost a formal approach within the school, in terms of we were a pilot for a nurture room, like Gerry described, and we call it a wellbeing suite in Boclair. But it was, for us, more than that, like it is in Clydebank. It was making sure those nurturing principles that existed for young people, supported maybe in that targeted way, were out across the whole school, like Wendy was describing, so that the relationships were maybe helped in one area, but needed to be out across the whole school. So that's a big part of embedding it in our school. And of course, that we've been helped by so many people along the way. That we've been helped with by people from the Child Poverty Action Group that helped us understand poverty and trauma. We've been helped by our partners in Tigers, who helped us think through trauma coming into our school every day and just continuing to work and explore. And I remember my first ever conversation about 5 or 6 years ago with a group of middle leaders in my school, where we said, should we be sharing with everyone across the school the poverty or the trauma that young people bring into school? And it was an interesting debate 6 years ago where some of my colleagues said no, because we treat all our young people the same, regardless of where they're from. And of course, that was part of the problem, because we shouldn't be treating all our young people the same. We should be treating our young people according to the needs that they bring into school and the love that they need. And that's different for every individual young person. So, but that started a debate that has led to what I think is now a very successful school, a hugely warm and caring school, and that is out across the whole school, but it's been built brick by brick, almost, Gerry, to use your metaphor, for over a long period of time. And it's not perfect, as Clare will go on, and I'm sure say there are definitely bumps in the road, is the phrase that she uses, but nevertheless it's a delight, and our young people know that we care about them, I think.
Wonderful. I'll come to Clare in just a moment. I think it's wonderful, and I saw Suzanne's face when you said that you were in love with your school. I just saw Suzanne beam at that phrase.
I think it's remarkable that a head teacher would say so warmly, I am in love with my school. And of course, then we think, what happens if a head teacher is not in love with their school? That makes it harder for the head teacher. It makes it harder for the senior management team. You know, teachers, school staff, head teachers have tremendous requests and responsibilities in our society. If we cannot provide support to the adults who are in the lives of children, then we can't help young people and children, because it is the adults who regulate them. So the idea that I am in love with my school says something about the whole ethos and culture that a school is able to achieve. And I have seen in the chat box that Pauline Scott has said, this is about leadership. And so it is. Leadership is part of the conversation that we should be having about trauma-informed and relational approaches. So it's nice to shine a light on that, Gerry.
Well, let's shine a light even further, and let's see Boclair Academy in action.
Here we go. Can I just say what I love about this video from Boclair? In fact, Gerry, can I just undermine your role as host? Can I get Clare to come in and say, here's why. Sorry, Gerry, you're so kind to me. This video that we're about to see was made entirely by the young people. So when Clare sent it to me, she basically said, I don't really almost even know what's in it because we didn't have time to pay attention to it. The young people have done it. Clare, do you just want to share with other people that little experience about just making this video from young people?
Yes, of course. It's a delight, and I'm so proud of the video that they've produced, and I'm sure everyone will be really impressed with it. But we've like schools, you know, across the country, we've had a really difficult week this week, and we were preoccupied with other things that just took over our time. And I'm thinking, oh, how on earth am I going to get this video done? And Douglas and I spoke about it, and we spoke to our captains, and we briefed them on what we were needing and said, go away and do it. And they did, and they've talked about our school. It's the beauty of actually encouraging pupils to have their voice, because the video they produced is quite different to probably what I would have directed them to, but it's even more amazing because there's nothing like out of the mouth of babes, you know. They explain so well how they feel about our school, and I guess like Clydebank, we know these individuals really well. We know what their backgrounds are, and what they've come through as young people as well. And to see them on screen talking about our school so lovingly is just an absolute joy.
We have popped a little tiny intro on the front as a little gift to the pupils, so that anybody who sees this anywhere knows who they are and what the purpose of this video was.
And I'm the head boy at Boclair Academy.
And I'm Emily, the head girl.
Welcome to the Clydebank Every morning, Mr. Brown and the deputies are here to welcome us.
It's nice to see their faces. It makes me feel included in Boclair.
They're also here at the end of the day to say goodbye to us.
Boclair's been trying hard to ensure that school lunches have still been running. They have a system where in registration pupils can order a grab bag for their lunch, which includes sandwiches, fruit, a cookie and a drink. Boclair's also trying to gradually bring back hot lunches using the same system as the grab bags. Pupils also have the option to pick up free toast at break, which gives us something to look forward to in the morning. On top of that, on a Friday, we get hot chocolate, which is really nice, especially as the weather's getting colder.
It's always nice to have free toast at break time, which means we're never hungry.
On Fridays, we look forward to the free hot chocolate.
There's a seating pan at break and lunch that makes everything less stressful.
Once a week, Mr. Brown makes sure to host a Teams assembly where he can update us all on the latest rules and any school news. This keeps us updated and gives us some contact with Mr. Brown and the senior pupils, despite not being able to see them in person.
Even with the new rules for cleaning and sanitisation in a lot of different places in the school, we're still able to do a lot of different things in our practical subjects. For example, in my physics class, I'm still able to do electricity experiments, and in my design and manufacture, I can still do a lot of woodwork and metalwork. It definitely helps because it makes classes feel a lot more normal, and it sort of keeps things sort of similar to how they used to be before COVID.
Especially during this COVID time, a lot of pupils' mental health is at risk. So the teachers have sort of not shouted at us when we're giving troubles, but kind of take us out of class and set us aside to give us a more personal talking to, and it makes some of the interactions more like friendly and a lot less emotional and more attached rather than shouting and all that.
There's a real sense of community at Boclair. The teachers really like to value our opinions and they like to take care of our well-being and health.
So as well as everything else going on, and on top of the current challenges we're all facing, we are getting a new school building, as you can tell behind us, which is just so exciting.
I hope you now know a little bit more about the sense of community at Boclair and the relationship we have with our teachers.
We really love our school and we've had a great time here so far. Thanks for listening.
Well, I have to say, Claire, you have every right to be proud of your students, and I think you've got some future presenters in there as well. I have to say, talk to me about toast and hot chocolate, because it was obviously mentioned a few times. It's been very impactful with the students. What's it all about?
So toast it's one of the positives actually out of the situation that we all find ourselves in with all the regulations and mitigations surrounding COVID, where we work with an organisation called Fair Share, and so that we can then offer a free breakfast club and a pop-up cafe at intervals for our young people, so that everyone can have a snack for free, breakfast or a snack for free, or both. But because of all the restrictions with COVID, we are, and the type of building that we are, we've used up all our spaces. We've had to create 3 canteens for our staggered breaks and intervals, and lunch times, and a breakfast club was something that we've actually had to lose. So where that was a disappointment to us, it was really important for us to try and think of a way in which we could still ensure all our children have breakfast and a snack and toast. That toast was born out of this, but it was actually really that simple concept. It was we felt like a quick and easy way to ensure that everyone has something to eat each morning. But the actual impact of it it's been so significant. It's unreal. We didn't set out for toast every day to be part of self-regulation, but that's really what it has become. The smell of toast is unreal. It's got such that sort of heartwarming smell that just makes you feel good. The children get very excited about it. There's no queuing now in our canteen areas, which was one of the decisions that we made to help with COVID. Because we have 3 areas for children to sit and have their break, and because they're staggered, They all have a seat. They know exactly where they're sitting. They can, so we've got seating plans, which helps us work with public health if we have to track and trace. But it means that they can leave their classrooms, they get a full break, they pick up their toast, they sit down and they can have conversations with their friends. Whereas actually prior to that, and we won't change this, prior to that they were queuing sometimes for the full break, and only just as the bell was about to go they were getting their snack and then they were off to class, so they weren't really getting a break, or they didn't have a seat, they couldn't find, we just don't have enough areas for children to sit down, just given the kind of dynamics of our school building and the number of children that we have. But thankfully we're getting a new school, so that will help, but that's a few years down the line. But the response has just been, it's been incredible. And the children get a proper break, they get something to eat, there's no stigma, you can have, it's not a bargaining tool. It's if you've made mistakes, if something's gone wrong, there's no, you just get your toast, you can have your toast, you can come back up for another slice if you wish. And it's just been really powerful and lovely, a lovely part of our school community now. And then, sorry,
Claire, can I just come in? I don't want Gerry to send another question, she says, taking over yet again, because okay, following on from your story about toast, Gerry, what if the Guardian headline had said toast as a way to help schools cope with COVID? Right? People would have laughed at that. That would have been crazy. We're somehow more comfortable talking about, let's look at the discussion about zero tolerance. But the idea that you can have toast as an approach to COVID and discipline sounds to most people ludicrous, and people would laugh at that. And yet, Claire, that is what you're saying, is that right? That toast is part of your way of helping children manage behavior in COVID times, and staff as well. Have we got that right?
Yes, I think the impact of toast and ensuring that no child is hungry and that they're all included and they can sit down and get a break has helped everything remain calm in our school.
Wendy, if I could come to you with regard to Clydebank High School, how has being trauma-informed helped you and your team and your students and their parents actually get through COVID?
It's been very, very challenging. We also have a breakfast club, and it's similar. We're probably a bit more fortunate. We've got a bit more room in our dining hall. We can take probably all of our children for a breakfast club. But that we've seen a significant rise in young people coming in for breakfast in the morning, whereas normally they would come in for 10 to 9. We're now seeing them at 8:15. We work with an organisation, for anybody who's listening, they should be getting in touch, called Magic Breakfast, and they supply us with free breakfast. So it's been incredibly successful. For us, we're probably getting about 150, 200 children eating breakfast every day with us before they start in the morning. No matter what the background, completely free to them. COVID has been, as I said, and it's for anybody who's working in education, working in any situation, very, very challenging. We feel like at times that you're kind of going back the way. We've come so far, but we know that being understanding, having our staff trained with nurture principles. We have a staff of about 150. And right now we have 92 staff fully trained in nurture principles. We have 42 currently going through the training. We are fully sustainable in that we've got staff who are able to do the training. We don't need to wait for educational psychology to come to do it. We can do it ourselves. So whether you work in the office, whether you're the head teacher, whether you are the Janny, you are offered the training, and we do it during the school day so that you don't have to give up your own time. We feel it's that important. As a leadership team, we feel it's that important that everybody has the same philosophy, the same understanding for the pupils of our school, because this is our family.
Gerry, there's been some wonderful innovation that's been demonstrated in just 30 minutes of this conversation. Unless I'm wrong, there doesn't seem to be a guidebook on how to do this. I mean, one thing that I'm so impressed with, for instance, is the brick. We keep coming back to the brick, but how important is innovation and innovation within individual schools to suit their own needs? How important is that to get this and to progress this?
I think it's very important because we've got children, especially from Clydebank High, coming from all sorts, so all different backgrounds. I mean, I think it's really what we really work on with our pupils. And I just don't do nurture in the morning. I run resilience groups most days with hundreds and hundreds of kids. I run mindfulness groups with hundreds and hundreds of kids. And this is on a weekly basis. So we're really learning these kids about brain development. We're learning them how to self-regulate their own self-regulatory system, you would say, and to access calm. So that's why, I mean, lots of these kids, and I have this conversation with staff, and I always say it's not about healing the behaviour, it's about healing the brain, and then you will see changes in behaviour. And it's as simple as that. We do not need to be, the need to be therapists. We just need to be compassionate. And if you're compassionate, that biology will have a massive effect on the young people.
Douglas, how much additional work is needed by teams in schools to do this, essentially? You're doing it very successfully. We've got examples. Is there a fear that, that's just something else that we need to do on top of teaching and the results and the day-to-day? Is there a worry? Is there a fear about that, do you think?
Not for us. It's about commitment and it's about consistency. For us, and I loved hearing Wendy saying it's a whole school approach. It's the every single person, every single day, because that's what we committed to, and it's about staying strong in that commitment, Gary, and just being relentless in that. Putting the child at the centre is an easy thing to say. It's actually an easy thing to do as well, and it's that. And so we, like Clydebank, all our staff are trained, but it was a really interesting conversation a few years ago with my office staff who also attended the nurture training and attended the trauma training and attended the poverty training. And my office manager, she'll not be on this call, but she said to me, there was an overnight change in how they approach young people even coming to the office, and that's just continued. And that togetherness, bringing all our teams across the school, every member of staff and all the young people, and making it a whole school approach, which sounds identical to what we're doing in Clydebank as well. So 2 different schools for different reasons, maybe starting it, but with a very similar approach. And it's about that consistency and commitment and making the decision that that's what you're going to do. But we also, whenever we recruit new teachers to the school, we always meet with them first, and we, wherever we can, make sure they meet with children first. And even in these COVID times, they're meeting with the children on Teams before we allow them to come and work in our school. But I do say to them that what we need for anybody that wants to come and work in the school is we need to make sure that they can believe in that philosophy of caring and nurturing. And I use the phrase with them all the time, it needs to be unconditional love from them as well, because if it's not, then they can't work in our school, so they'll never understand our school. And I say to them, if you leave here and you think that's not for me, no harm to you, that's fine, but don't come and work with us, because you'll never ever fit in with us. So it's about commitment and belief, actually, and probably about making sure that we stay strong even when it's hard.
Suzanne?
There's actually quite a lot of courage being talked about here today that underpins everything that all our guests today are saying. So Pauline Scott, who, again, I'm just watching the chat go by, and Pauline Scott, who in fact is the director of Tigers, who Douglas mentioned earlier today as being a real support to Boclair Academy. Pauline has written, "We do not need to be experts, we just need to be compassionate." So in my standard style, using a really strong statement, in other words, edgy, that helps some people go, oh, have you gone too far? Let me try this. what Pauline is saying is that if we just need to be compassionate rather than experts, then does that mean that a zero tolerance approach actually is not very compassionate? Right? Now, if there's anybody watching this who's at a zero tolerance school, I perfectly understand that they might go, wait a second, you can't say that. And herein is the difficulty that we are talking about. To really think about what young people are feeling and how a school ethos and we as individuals contribute to that and frame that and shape it is hard and scary. So what all of the schools here today have done is that they have been willing to think more deeply about how adult rules and culture impact on how children feel. Because a zero tolerance school, given that you started with that example, Gerry, effectively says, we don't care what's going on for you. We don't care about the chaos that you're living in. It's not our responsibility to understand your underlying biological state. All we are interested in is your behavior. And the idea is that somehow by having high behavioral standards, we are relieved of the need to think about that deeper stuff. And the schools here today are going, nah, we think it's our responsibility to get interested in that. And Pauline Scott has called that compassion. Well, it becomes edgy and I think really important to ask, does that mean that we have some uncompassionate settings in the country? And what would we do about that if we discovered that we did? That is the edgy question that it underpins what we are asking here today. And so I'm really appreciative that there are staff who are willing to come and talk about this, given that you don't know who will be watching, the story that you are telling of your schools. Gerry, is that edgy enough, do you think?
Well, I just want to be a little bit more edgy, actually, because you talk about behaviour there, but I also want to say, but for some schools, maybe is it about behaviour and results, and the pressure that comes on schools to deliver these results?
Let Douglas speak. I can see his head going like this. Douglas, what would you say?
I think there is a great deal of pressure on schools to ensure that young people attain well, and rightly so. There should be pressure on schools to ensure that young people attain well, but they're not mutually exclusive. You can have caring, nurturing, in fact, you should have caring, nurturing, inclusive schools, because if you get that bit right, then you will, in any case, achieve high results. It's not a surprise to me, for example, that since we, and again, this has been built over years, but we focus on what has become a hugely successful wider achievement programme for young people, so that every young person in every year, we call it our all-inclusive wider achievement programme, so that every young person every year achieves something that's nothing to do with attainment. It's not linked to their exam results. But for me, when I joined the school, I wasn't confident that every young person was involved in a club, a sports club, or whatever. So my challenge to my senior team at that time was build a programme where every single person has an opportunity to achieve, forget the results. But it's not a surprise to me, Gerry, that in that time where we focused on something different from attainment, and we focused on inclusion, and we focused on young people achieving and developing those softer skills and developing that more rounded humanity in our young people, it's not a surprise to me that correspondingly our results improved. And we're a high attaining school in any case, but our results improved year on year on year. Mm-hmm. And we didn't focus on that, we focused on the other things. So, but it's the leap of faith that I've mentioned before.
And Wendy's nodding, lots of nodding actually from Wendy as you were talking there. Do you want to come back on that, Wendy?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, we've been on quite the journey. I mean, when I started to look, obviously, that this was part of my remit. We had, when we first started, when we looked at our exclusion figures, we had 91 exclusions in 1 year, and we thought, we need to do something different. This isn't working for us. And then we introduced nurture, and then we introduced nurture training for staff. Within the first year, our exclusions dropped to 54. The second year, they dropped to 34. And obviously, COVID came in last year. So we were on a different path. And with that, then our attainment, because more young people were being included, they felt safe. The relationships were strong. Our attainment year on year has improved. So there is, like you say, it's not mutually exclusive. It certainly goes in partnership.
Claire, if I could come to you, how important is the role of parents in this to make it work? And how do you as a school educate parents the way that you're working with their children? How does it all link together?
We're very lucky. We have a really supportive parental body and a very, very strong parent council as well, that are kept up to date all the time, and even through the most challenging times with COVID, there's been actually probably more meetings than you would normally have. So we do keep people fully informed. But I think when things go wrong in schools, young people make mistakes, adults make mistakes, and sometimes they're really hard mistakes, but we always take the view of, we will help you recover. There's a way back from this, and you're welcome back in your school, and you'll be in your classroom as normal when the next time that you're due to go there. But part of the luxury of being, or a privilege of being a senior leader, is that often we're involved in those really tricky situations, and we'll scoop the young person up and we'll talk to them, and we give them the time and the space to be listened to. We try to really understand them, but part of that, as you say, Gary, is about involving the parents, and often where we're being that supportive, I'll often phone a parent or speak to a parent with the child in the room. We try to be really open and honest and include them. And if I'm saying to the parent, look, we're going to help your child, it's not the end of the world, there's a way back for them, this is what we're going to do to support the child, and we're not giving them a big shouty row, which it kind of permissions the parent. So when the child goes home, the last thing we want is for us to have had a really calm, compassionate, understanding conversation. I don't want to then send them home to then get a big shouty row at home, if that is maybe, because parents sometimes remember school from when they were at school, and it's very different, particularly in our school, and we really want to make sure that we involve parents in our approaches, and to say to them, look, it's okay, you can go home, talk to your child about this, of course, support us, but support us in the way that we're dealing with it, and we can't wait to see you tomorrow. And I think that is really important to help parents, educate them maybe, but help them understand the supportive role that we're playing in helping young people learn from the behaviours or whatever's going on for them.
I want to go to Gerry in just a second, but Suzanne?
Claire, I just heard you say that you're very lucky in the support that you have from parents. Can I just offer, I don't think that's true. I think what is true is that you have helped to create an ethos and a culture and a community that lets the parents know how to support you. And so I just wanted to highlight that, because the conversations that you're having help us to see how this feeling and this understanding and these insights and this shift in how we understand behavior ripples out through a whole community, right? It's not just in parts of a community, it's the wider community. It's not just the school. And many of the people in the chat at the moment are saying, this is such a hard thing to discuss. It's so hard to contemplate these questions because they're about relationships and how we treat each other. The stories that you're telling, Claire, you just have helped us to see how this ripples out to parents and makes them feel safe, as well as the pupils and all of the staff. That's why it's such a powerful topic and set of stories to tell. Gerry, is that helpful to chuck in?
Wonderful. It certainly is. Gerry, people like me, journalists, the press, the media, we have a role to play, and we open this by a nice large dramatic headline from The Guardian, and we turned it on its head and talked about if it was toast and so on. But journalists love these big juicy headlines, and they like to see the more robust arguments on both sides. A Conservative MP, regardless of actually the party, but an MP earlier this year who used to be a teacher was quoted in a newspaper article by saying we should unreservedly celebrate schools with high expectations and zero tolerance policies. He then went on to mention a couple of schools in England, both of which have excellent Ofsted ratings, excellent results and the highest standards of behaviour. How do you answer people on the other side of the argument who may see this approach as wishy-washy and weak?
Well, I say the zero tolerance language really sits uncomfortable with me. Anytime I see it mentioned through Twitter or whatever, everything else, it's really uncomfortable. As I keep saying before, we get kids coming into school with so much dysregulation, so much emotional baggage. And how can you have a zero tolerance approach in that? How can you have a child coming to you who's dysregulated, who has having so much going on at home, and his behaviour is showing stress behaviour, and we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg when there's so much else packed underneath? How can you show a zero tolerance response to that? I just do not get it. I become dysregulated when I hear the word zero tolerance. So again, kids are coming with so much baggage into school, and we need to move in with a compassionate response.
What do we need to change in our language, Gerry, then? You know, so you know, and I can see the heckles going up on everybody on this call when we're talking about zero tolerance. But what sort of language should we be using, do you think? And let me open that up. Let me open that up.
I'll give you it in simplest terms, okay? I think it's Gabor Mate who came out with this quote, and it's not what's wrong with you, it's what's happened to you. And that opens up another conversation.
Wendy?
Definitely. We don't want children who have zero tolerance. We want to encourage children to be resilient, but to have tolerance for each other, tolerance from, you know, their staff, tolerance from just well-rounded young people. A zero tolerance just would never work in our school. There's no place in our school.
Claire, what about you? What sort of language should we be using to replace this style of thinking?
I think changing the thinking, the way the adults, you know, think, and I think for us it's about, you know, we value all our children, and they should be bringing them their whole self, you know, whatever that looks like. And I think, you know, I would love to know in these schools, what do the young people think about their school? Do they feel safe? Do they feel valued? And, you know, and I would rather they felt safe and valued. And I think everyone has the ability to shout and force the behaviour of young people, but the relationship is gone instantly. There's no relationship, and that's what the most important thing is. And what are we teaching them? You know, they would then continue with that behaviour, and then they work like that. Whereas we want to be, as lots of people in the conversation have said, it's that well-rounded young person. And, you know, if you leave school and you remember kindness and compassion and love, then, you know, that's brilliant.
Liz, do you think as a society, it's a very general question, but as a society, do we underestimate young people and their potential?
Oh. Gerry, can I come in there?
Yep, of course.
What if I want to reframe that? I think we underestimate our impact on young people. That's one of the things that I think we underestimate. We underestimate how important relationships are, and we underestimate the impact of stress. And we do that partly because we have a culture that taught us to pay attention to children's behavior rather than to how they feel. And so the conversations we are having today, and the conversations that all of Tigers and Teddies is part of, is really about a fundamental cultural shift about how important emotions and relationships are. And I'm just really glad that there are so many courageous leaders and individuals who are willing to step into that conversation, because it does take courage.
I just want to do a round robin around the room before we wrap up, because as always, the time has just flown by. Douglas, if I could come to you first, and it's the same question to everybody. One bit of advice that you could give, given the experience that you have in terms of being a trauma-informed school, what bit of advice, what bit of encouragement would you give another head teacher to adopt this policy, or practice rather?
It's a good question, Gary. Thanks for that. I suppose for me, so the advice I gave to myself when I took up the post of head teacher was to stay strong in my belief and my commitment to that relationship-based approach. When you start with any new school, to establish yourself, it's to go back to what one or two colleagues, it's easy to shout. Be easy for me to shout, but I don't. I choose not to. And when I speak to young people, I tell them, be easy for me to shout here. I'm choosing not to, because the relationship's more important. If I shout at a young person for being late to school, then that young person goes stressed all day. If I shouted at an adult for coming late to school, I would be in trouble. So I suppose it would be, if you want a really simple but very powerful thing, would be, stop the shouting and start with the relationships.
Wendy, same question.
Given the journey we've been on, I would say you absolutely need to be resilient. Don't give up, because you know at the end why you're doing it. It's for the young people of Clydebank High. That's why I do it. The young people at Clydebank High School are absolutely worth it. So don't give up.
Claire?
I think, don't give up, but also think of the young people as your own. I know how I want my children to be treated when they go to school, so I need to give that same respect to other people's children. Those young people are someone's world, and they deserve to be loved unconditionally.
And Gerry?
Yeah, well, since really the topic is on being trauma-informed, I mean, what can staff and teachers do? I would begin by addressing the trauma and looking at it through a trauma-informed lens. Get to know your pupils, show them you care, show empathy. And again, as I said, asking the question, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what's happened to you. And always look at, just very quickly, about understanding the biological content, because what we're really trying to do with the groups in our school is strengthen the underdeveloped parts of these children's brains and get them back into their learning brain again. So I look at it as a biological and a trauma-informed.
So, Suzanne, another extremely impactful 60 minutes. Final word to you. What are your thoughts based on what you've heard this morning?
I love that this morning helps us to see that trauma-informed is not about some specialist groups of children or some specialist communities. What we've heard is that this is a whole group, a whole school approach. And what it means is that trauma tells us about our own humanity. And that means it applies to every single one of us, and that relationships are at the key to healing and to helping people thrive and reach their potential. And I just love that there are so many people part of that conversation. So I'm so grateful that you've all come this morning. Thank you.
Gerry, Wendy, Douglas and Claire, thank you for your contributions this morning. Thank you for your wonderful students who produced those fantastic videos. And please, and I'm sure that some of them may be watching this morning, absolutely brilliant. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much indeed for your openness and your honesty and sharing your professional views. We're back on the 21st of November. It's our final live of the year, where we'll be talking about knitting teddies, but actually there's much more than knitting teddies. It's about how we're using teddies to comfort fear. So please join us. And Suzanne, we'll be encouraging people to send in pictures of their everybody get theirs, please. Gerry, we know that you can share mine. It's okay. Let's see. So people can send in pictures. Yeah.
So it's the last episode in the year. We just thought that we would reflect back a bit and really celebrate the power of Teddies. And so if everybody on social media wants to send us a picture as we run into the next episode of you and your Teddies, we can really talk about why Teddies comfort fear, why that is so important, and why if we got even more people in Scotland knitting teddies, because there's been a bit of that over the last couple of years. It's one way to help lots of people know. And so we're going to talk to a community where a lot of knitting of teddies has been going on. So send us your photographs next time to celebrate teddies.
And I'll be wearing this festive bow tie, which was sent to me by Willoughby Bear, You know who you are, just to get us in the mood for Crimble, although it'll be a little bit early, but hey, it's never too early, particularly after the year we've had. So once again, all of us here, from the whole crew and from our guests and from the students in Scotland, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.